In 1989, Sega released a new Shinobi game for its System 18 arcade board called Shadow Dancer. Sega R&D 1 was back to do the honors, and they had some nifty additions like a K9 companion and improved visuals. The story in the game didn't link directly to the original Shinobi, but the arcade flyers made it clear it was part of the same universe. It was a fairly solid game overall, but nowhere near as popular as the original Shinobi. Sega's new 16-bit home platform had already seen a successful sequel to Shinobi by Sega R&D 2, so they were put in charge of bringing Shadow Dancer home to the Genesis in 1990. They must not have been fans of the arcade, because quite a bit would be changed in this new version of the game. We got a different story, redesigned stages, new enemies, new bosses, new music, hell, it was practically a brand new game. In this episode, we will be taking a deep dive into Shadow Dancer, The Secret of Shinobi for the Sega Genesis. Right from the get-go, the Genesis Shadow Dancer carves a new path. The story now directly centers on Joe Musashi, who has retired from his adventuring days and returned to Japan. But while Joe is enjoying the good life, a new criminal organization begins terrorizing New York City. Kato, Joe's former student, is killed while trying to stop them, bringing the former ninja master out of retirement to exact revenge against his new foe. Using Kato's well-trained dog Yamato, Joe confronts Union Lizard in an effort to fell its hideous reptilian leader. Funnily enough, Sega changed the story even further for the Japanese release. Instead of Joe Musashi being the lead ninja, it's his son Hayate. Beginning the game, you quickly see that this plays a lot like the original Shinobi. One hit and you're dead makes its triumphant return, as does rescuing hostages. There are score bonuses, extra men, and power-ups you can get for your weapons as well. You have a basic attack that uses what the game calls Death Stars as projectiles, as well as an up-close melee attack with your sword. You also have both normal jump and a super jump to get to higher platforms. Rounding out the 3-button interface is your magic attack, which hits everything on the screen. The most significant addition is your dog. Charging your attack button allows you to send your companion dashing across the screen to incapacitate the nearest foe. This allows you better control over the battlefield by attacking enemies on different levels or hiding behind cover. You must be careful, however. Sending the dog into a heavily armored enemy capable of blocking will see him taking damage and reduced to a puppy. This makes him unusable for a short period of time. Most of the stages are your typical left to right affairs with the odd vertical layout here and there. Enemies range from easily dispatched morons that run straight into your weapons of death to nimble killing machines that can block and jump the entire length of the screen. Each stage ends in a boss fight, usually some huge enemy that takes 5 or 6 good hits to defeat. Finally, bonus stages take the form of your ninja jumping off a tall building and shooting bad guys on the way down, earning you an extra man if you do well. The story wasn't the only thing to get a big change in Shadow Dancer. The visuals are also redone in a big way. The main hero has a brand new look, as do the enemies in the stages. Everything looks really nice too, and I consider this a nice upgrade over the arcade original. The opening stage has some cool background effects, and there are some impressive layering in some of the other areas as well. There's no slowdown to speak of, even when the screen has multiple enemies strewn about. Those enemies are animated well, as are the two main characters. The way your dog reacts looks great, from the simple act of barking at enemies to the way he dashes across the screen and wrestles with the bad guys. It's all well done. Some folks prefer the arcade version, but I must say, the home version is a heck of a nice looking game as well. I often pop this in just to play the bridge level and watch the water move by, one of my favorite effects in any Genesis title. Perhaps the most impressive thing about all this is the fact that it comes in at just 4 megabits. It's not a long game, but the locations are varied and the color and art are very impressive. Shinobi 3 would come later and outdo it pretty handily, but for an early game in the life of the Genesis, this is still a game that could turn heads. The music was also redone for this version. I always thought the music in the arcade was a bit too hard-edged for its own good. It had points where it was legitimately grating to the ear. I found myself enjoying much of what was in this version, however. It's still fast and hard, but has an overall better presentation and flow. Here are a few examples to see if you agree. It's difficult to judge a game like this without bringing up comparisons to the Shinobi games that came before and after it. Just how well does it hold up against the other games in the series? The good news is that the core gameplay remains as excellent as it ever was. Your ninja is fast and nimble, and your attacks connect with a satisfying impact that makes the gameplay really feel great. The graphics and sound round out a package that makes for one fine game overall. Weaknesses mainly stem from Sega's design philosophies of the era. It's really short and a full playthrough lasts no time once you know the ins and outs. There's only 5 stages, with the final one consisting of only a handful of rooms that all look the same. I also did not enjoy the final boss fight of this game. You are locked in a tiny area with constantly respawning enemies and can only hit the boss at certain points. I mean, this guy takes up half the screen and never moves. It's kind of a cop-out. Instead of a legit well-designed battle at the end of the game, you are essentially just fighting enemies you fought from earlier stages. These issues don't come close to ruining this experience, however. This is still a damn fine Shinobi. At the time, its only competition on the Genesis was the Revenge of Shinobi, and it looks and plays different enough from that it firmly stands on its own. This was much more like the original arcade Shinobi, and I think that gives it its own feel and sets it apart from the Super Shinobi games quite a bit. If you have never given it a spin but enjoy action platformers, I highly recommend that you do. The Shinobi series on a whole is loaded with great entries, and Shadow Dancer: The Secret of Shinobi continues that fine tradition. It is short, and that final boss encounter was really weak, but overall this one really hits the nail on the head for those that enjoyed the original Shinobi arcade game and its challenge. And speaking of challenge, this game has 3 difficulty settings that radically affect enemy placement and number. You can really make it difficult, and it provides a nice change up once you beat it for the first time. You can also turn off your death stars, which makes the game hard at first, but having the ability to melee attack all the time has its advantages. Once you get good and know the enemy patterns, this becomes quite the fun way to play the game. It's really easy to overlook this one, with Shinobi 3 coming later on and adding so much to the series. But what this one lacks in those additions, it makes up for with a solid challenge and its faithfulness to the original arcade Shinobi. There's an appeal to its straightforward action, and Sega really knew how to make the most of it. It doesn't dethrone the Super Shinobi games for me, but it definitely earns its place on my shelf as a must-own. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.